The billionaire stepped out onto the private runway at Teterboro Airport, the cool morning air brushing lightly against his face as the distant hum of aircraft echoed across the tarmac. His sleek private jet stood just ahead, polished, silent, and waiting. For Daniel Carter, this was nothing unusual. Another flight, another deal, another city waiting to be conquered. His security team stood nearby, positioned with precision. Their eyes scanned every movement, every shadow, every passing vehicle. To anyone watching, it was flawless control. Everything was secure. Everything was predictable, or so it seemed. Daniel adjusted the cuff of his tailored navy suit and began walking toward the aircraft stairs, his leather briefcase swinging slightly in his hand. Then, "Sir, please wait." The voice was small, almost lost in the open air. But it stopped him instantly. He didn't turn because it was loud. He turned because something about it didn't belong there. Slowly, he looked over his shoulder. Standing just a few steps away was a young black girl, no older than 8. She wore a simple faded dress and slightly worn sneakers. In one hand, she held a small woven basket. In the other, a folded piece of paper, gripped tightly as if it carried something important, or something dangerous. Daniel frowned slightly. This was a secured runway at one of the busiest private aviation hubs in the country. No one, especially not a child, should have been able to get this close. His security team noticed her immediately. One of them took a step forward. Daniel raised his hand. "Stop." The guard froze in place. The girl hesitated for a second, her eyes flicking toward the guards, then back to Daniel. "Sir," she said again, her voice trembling now, "please don't get on that jet today." Daniel slowly lowered his briefcase, studying her carefully. There was no playfulness in her face, no curiosity, only fear, real, unmistakable fear. He glanced briefly at the jet behind him, then back at her. "Why?" he asked calmly. The girl swallowed, her fingers tightening around the folded paper, crumpling its edges. She took a small step closer. "I heard them," she whispered. Daniel's expression didn't change, but inside, something shifted. "Heard who?" he asked quietly. Her lips trembled as she glanced past him, toward the 4 security guards standing near the aircraft stairs. The same guards assigned to protect him. "The guards," she said softly. The new ones." A faint tension crept into Daniel's chest. "What about them?" he asked. "They weren't speaking English," she said. His eyes narrowed slightly. "What language?" She hesitated, then leaned closer, lowering her voice even more. "Russian," she whispered. For a moment, the world around him seemed to pause. "And they said," she continued, her voice barely audible now, "that plane," she pointed weakly toward the jet, "will never reach the sky safely today." Silence fell between them, not the normal kind, but the kind that presses against your chest and refuses to let go. Daniel straightened slowly, his mind already racing beneath his calm exterior. He had built billion-dollar empires from nothing. He had negotiated with ruthless competitors, survived betrayals, and read people for a living. He knew lies. He knew manipulation. And in that moment, he knew this child wasn't lying. Still, logic tried to intervene. It was a child, an impossible claim, a secured environment. But something about her, the way she stood there, small yet unshaken, afraid yet determined, refused to let him ignore her. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated, then answered softly. "Maya." He nodded once. "Maya. How did you hear them?" "I was near the service hallway," she said quickly. "They didn't see me. One of them had a phone, and they kept looking at the plane." Her breathing grew uneven. "I didn't understand everything," she admitted, "but I understood enough." Daniel held her gaze for a long second. Then he made a decision. A quiet one, but one that would change everything. Without another word, he turned away from the jet. Sir? One of the guards called out, confused as Daniel changed direction. I need a moment, Daniel said calmly. Delay boarding. His voice was steady, controlled but final. No one argued. As he walked toward the private terminal, his grip on the briefcase tightened slightly. His mind was no longer on meetings, or deals, or schedules. It was on one thing. What if she's right? Just before entering the building, he glanced back. Maya was still standing there, watching him, not smiling, not relieved, just waiting, as if she knew. This was only the beginning. The glass doors of the private terminal slid open as Daniel Carter stepped inside, leaving behind the quiet tension of the runway at Teterboro Airport. The environment changed instantly. Inside, everything felt controlled. Polished marble floors, soft lighting, quiet conversations between executives and staff. It was a world Daniel understood, a world where everything followed structure, logic, and predictability. But his mind was no longer in that world. It was still outside, with the little girl's warning echoing over and over again. That plane will never reach the sky safely today. Daniel walked calmly toward the private lounge, his expression unreadable. To anyone watching, nothing seemed unusual. But the moment he stepped into a more secluded corridor, his voice dropped. Call Ethan. Within seconds, his head of security, Ethan Cole, appeared beside him, moving quickly but without drawing attention. What's wrong? Ethan asked under his breath. Daniel didn't stop walking. I want a full background check on the 4 guards assigned to my aircraft, he said quietly. Right now, no alerts, no noise. Ethan's expression tightened slightly. That's going to raise questions, he replied. Then don't raise any, Daniel said coldly. Do it quietly. That was enough. Ethan nodded once and disappeared down the hallway, already speaking into a concealed earpiece. Daniel stepped into the lounge and moved toward the large glass window overlooking the runway. From there, he could see everything. His jet stood exactly where he left it, still untouched. And near the aircraft stairs, the 4 guards. Daniel leaned slightly against the window, pretending to review documents on his tablet. But his eyes weren't reading. They were watching. The guards stood close together now, their formation tighter than before. One of them briefly glanced toward the terminal, then quickly looked away. Another adjusted his earpiece, but not in the casual way trained professionals usually did. It was subtle, but it wasn't right. Minutes later, Ethan returned. Fast. Too fast. That was quick, Daniel said without turning. That's because you were right to ask, Ethan replied quietly. Now Daniel looked at him. 2 of the guards were hired 3 weeks ago, Ethan continued. Outside contractor, temporary assignment. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. Background? Incomplete, Ethan said. Rushed verification. They were approved because we needed extra personnel for your visit this morning. A slow silence followed. Daniel turned his gaze back to the runway. 3 weeks, rushed approval, unknown contractors. Everything about it felt wrong. I want surveillance footage, Daniel said. Last 2 hours. Focus on those 2. Ethan nodded immediately, already pulling it. Moments later, they stood inside a private security room, the glow of multiple surveillance screens reflecting across the walls. The footage began to play. At first, nothing unusual. Passengers arriving, staff walking between terminals, security maintaining their positions. Normal, routine, safe. Then, pause, Daniel said suddenly. One screen froze. It showed the 2 new guards entering the building earlier that morning. Ethan leaned closer. They're early, he muttered. How early? Daniel asked. Almost an hour before their shift. Daniel's eyes didn't leave the screen. Play it. The footage continued. Instead of heading through the main security checkpoint like every other guard, they turned toward a side corridor, a service entrance. Ethan frowned. That's restricted access. Daniel said nothing. The footage switched to another camera angle. The same two guards now stood inside a narrow hallway, partially hidden from direct view. Then, another figure entered the frame, a man in a maintenance uniform. He carried something in his hand, a small black case. The three men spoke briefly. There was no audio, but their body language said enough. Tense, careful, calculated. But the maintenance worker looked around once, twice, then handed the case to one of the guards. Daniel leaned forward slightly. Zoom in. The image sharpened. One of the guards took the case quickly and turned away, moving toward a nearby wall panel. He opened it. A storage cabinet, restricted, and without hesitation, he placed the black case inside. The cabinet door closed. The maintenance worker walked away immediately. The guards separated, returning to their positions as if nothing had happened. The screen froze again. Silence filled the room, heavy, unavoidable. Ethan exhaled slowly. That cabinet, he said. Daniel didn't respond. Say it, Daniel said quietly. Ethan looked at him. It's connected to the aircraft fueling system controls. The words hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Daniel removed his glasses slowly. Now everything made sense. The rushed hires, the hidden meeting, the unknown case, and the girl's warning. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This was a plan, a precise one. Seal the area, Daniel said calmly. No alarms, no evacuations. I don't want them spooked. Ethan nodded immediately, already issuing silent commands through his earpiece. On the monitors, security personnel began moving subtly through the terminal. To anyone watching, it looked routine, but Daniel knew better. They were closing in. One officer approached the cabinet area, pretending to check equipment. Another positioned himself near the hallway exit. A third stood by, watching the guards from a distance. Every move was quiet, controlled, calculated. The cabinet was opened, slowly, carefully. The officer inside reached in and pulled out the black case. He placed it gently on a nearby table, then looked toward the door. A signal. Seconds later, a bomb technician entered the room. Daniel's eyes locked onto the screen. The technician knelt down, opening the case with precise, steady hands. For a moment, nothing. Then, his expression changed, slightly, but enough. Ethan saw it too. That's not good, he whispered. Inside the case, wires, a compact electronic device, and something far worse, an explosive charge, small but powerful, connected to a remote trigger. Daniel felt a cold wave move through his chest. If that device had been activated during fueling, the jet wouldn't just fail. It would be destroyed. Instantly. Everyone nearby. Gone. The room fell completely silent. No one spoke. No one moved. Because now, this wasn't a possibility. This was reality. The moment the bomb technician confirmed the device, everything shifted. What had started as a quiet suspicion, a child's warning, easy to ignore, had now become a full-scale assassination attempt. Inside the security room at Teterboro Airport, no one spoke for several seconds. Not because they didn't know what to do, but because they all understood how close they had come. Very close. Move in, Daniel Carter said calmly. That single command set everything into motion. Out on the terminal floor, security teams began closing in on the two guards. Their movements were smooth, almost routine, designed not to attract attention. The guards didn't notice at first. They continued standing near the aircraft stairs, maintaining their positions, exchanging occasional glances, waiting. But then, one of them saw it. Too many eyes, too many subtle movements, too much attention. His posture stiffened slightly. Too late. Within seconds, security officers surrounded them. "Gentlemen, we need you to come with us," one officer said calmly. The guards tried to stay composed. "What's this about?" one of them asked. "Routine verification," the officer replied. But the tightening circle told a different story. One guard took a small step back. Another looked toward the exit. There was no escape. In one swift, controlled motion, both men were restrained and escorted away without causing a scene. Passengers nearby barely noticed. But behind the calm exterior, a deadly plan had just collapsed. Inside a restricted interrogation room, the two guards sat across from investigators, their earlier confidence gone, replaced by tension, sweat, silence. At first, they denied everything. "We were hired for security," one insisted. "That's all we know." But then, a photograph slid across the table. The black case, opened, exposed. Their eyes changed instantly. The lie was over. The room grew heavier. Seconds passed. Then one of the guards exhaled deeply, lowering his head. "We didn't know," he said quietly. "No," an investigator replied. "Then tell us what you did know." The guard hesitated, then spoke. "A man approached us," he admitted, "a few days ago." "Name?" "I don't know," he said quickly. "He never told us. Everything was arranged through messages. Encrypted, temporary, untraceable. At least, that's what they thought." "What did he offer you?" the investigator asked. The guard swallowed. "Money," he said, "more than we'd make in a year." "And in return?" The second guard finally spoke, his voice lower. "We just had to place the device," he said, "near the fueling system." "That's it?" the investigator asked. They nodded. "He said it would only delay the flight," the first guard added quickly. "A mechanical issue, nothing serious." Silence. Then the investigator leaned forward slightly. "That device," he said, tapping the photo, "was strong enough to destroy the aircraft, and everyone near it." The words hit hard. Both guards froze, their faces drained of color. "That's not what we were told," one whispered. "But that's what you agreed to," the investigator replied coldly. Reality settled in, heavy, unforgiving. They hadn't just taken a job. They had stepped into something far darker. From behind a glass panel, Daniel watched everything. Silent. Still. But inside, his mind was moving rapidly. This wasn't random. This wasn't desperation. This was planned. Precise. Someone wanted him gone. Not delayed. Not inconvenienced. Removed. Permanently. "Who benefits?" Daniel asked quietly. Standing beside him, Ethan Cole didn't hesitate. "A lot of people," Ethan said, "but only a few would go this far." Daniel nodded slowly. Names began forming in his mind. Competitors. Rivals. Men who had lost everything because of him. Then one stood out. Clear. Unavoidable. A powerful international logistics corporation. One Daniel had crushed in a billion-dollar deal just last year. Their reputation had collapsed overnight. Their chairman had disappeared from public view soon after. But rumors had spread. That he never forgave defeat. Hours later, new information arrived. Phone data, recovered fragments of deleted messages. Encrypted, but not invisible. Cyber specialists had worked through layers of hidden networks, tracing signals across multiple countries. And finally, a connection, a single number, linked repeatedly to the guard's communications. The room went quiet as the report was handed to Daniel. He read it once, then again. His jaw tightened slightly. He recognized it, not the number, but where it led. The rival company. There it was. Proof, not complete, but enough to confirm what he already knew. This wasn't over. Not yet. Ethan looked at him carefully. "We can take this public," he said. "Expose everything." Daniel didn't answer immediately. He walked toward the window. staring out at the runway where his jet still stood, now surrounded by security vehicles and flashing lights. Just hours ago, he had been seconds away from boarding it. He exhaled slowly. "No," he said finally. Ethan frowned slightly. "No," he repeated. "Not yet," Daniel replied. "We go deeper. I want every name, every connection." His voice was calm, but there was something else beneath it now. Resolve. "Whoever started this," Daniel added quietly, "doesn't get a warning." Night settled over Teterboro Airport, the bright runway lights cutting through the darkness. The investigation continued behind closed doors. Arrests followed. The recruiter was found. Then others. Slowly, the entire chain began to unravel. What was meant to be a silent assassination became a silent exposure, and it all traced back to one moment. Then one decision, one voice. Later that night, Daniel stood alone near the glass window, the city lights flickering in the distance. For years, he believed power meant control, that money meant safety, that influence meant protection. But today had proven something different. Danger doesn't always announce itself, and protection doesn't always come from power. Sometimes it comes from the smallest voice in the room. He turned slightly. "Find her," he said. Ethan looked at him. "The girl," Daniel added. "Maya." Ethan nodded. "We'll find her." Daniel looked back at the runway one last time, because deep down, he knew something. Without her, none of this would have ended the same way. Never ignore a warning, no matter where it comes from. Because sometimes the truth doesn't arrive from experts, power, or experience. It comes from courage. Even the smallest voice can change the course of destiny. If this story kept you on edge, hit like, subscribe for more powerful stories like this, and turn on notifications so you never miss what comes next. And tell us in the comments, if you were in Daniel's place, would you have boarded that jet or trusted a little girl's warning? Because one decision can change everything.